We mentioned earlier on with our resident analysts that they seem to be pushing out what has been traditionally part of the top five that you would find the IFP and UDM. But the Democratic Alliance's Solima Ladzi, they're also speaking about the objections that they've lodged with the IC. So all the parties that seem to say that there is real evidence of some sort of malfeasance are saying that there is proof to back it up. But we mentioned earlier on, let me introduce you to my resident analyst, Paul Berkowitz, Mr. Paul Berkowitz, who is a researcher and political analyst. Dr. Dirk Kotze, you met earlier on. He's been with me taking us through the various provinces, the importance of the results that we're seeing. And we mentioned earlier on, before we went on to Simpiwe, that we'd look at the Western Cape. So the Western Cape, we mentioned the fact that quite a significant portion of those votes have been counted. As you can see, over 1 million of those votes counted, 54.98% for the Democratic Alliance, the ANC at 28.95%, the EFF at 3.98%. So those are the results. And just to take you to what we're seeing, the number of results captured, the voting districts captured, that is a very important figure. Please note that 1.4 million. And I want to look at the total valid votes. That's at 1,860,726. So let's just then zoom in to this district map. And what we're seeing here is a significant portion of the city of Cape Town, those votes still outstanding, and big metro. So that means, are we likely to see a major shift in what we have here in terms of the overall support? No? Gentlemen? Paul?
If past results are anything to go by, the DA has done better in the last couple of election rounds in the metro and in that outstanding area than it has in the rest of the province. So if those trends hold and nothing's really changed, if anything, the DA should improve on its current standing a little bit by the time the final results are in.
The Good Party made a very strong play for the votes in the Western Cape, particularly the metro. Some would have said the predominantly white votes. And we obviously haven't seen any showing of them, just looking at the map in terms of the top five parties. But as we can see, just going down so that our viewers will be able to see, the top five seems to have the Good Party there, number 4, ACDP at number 5. Dirk Kotze, what are your thoughts? What has been the swing votes? What are the results or the driving force behind those swing votes?
Well, the party that has lost votes is the DA, because in the previous election they had a total of around about 59%. Now it is around about 54%. The CSIR believes it will come to a point at around about 55%. So it means that they've lost around about 4%. I think what we are seeing is that the Good Party, which is a new party, so that 3% is a total win for them, from 0 to 3%. And I guess we can say that that 3% comes mainly from the DA. The Freedom Front Plus has also made some gains, and therefore the losses of the DA, I would say, is split between the Good Party and the Freedom Front Plus party.
Do you think the Cape Party will get a seat, at least in the Western Cape legislature? Your thoughts, Paul?
So, Professor, just refresh my memory. How many seats are in the legislature?
I think the maximum is normally 80. So, but the Western Cape hasn't. It's 80 seats there also.
Okay. So, if they divide it proportionately, to get 1 out of 80 seats, you would need approximately, to be guaranteed of 1 seat, you'd need about 1.25% of the vote. And then you'd say, okay, I've got 1 seat out of an 80-seat legislature. At the moment, the Cape Party is sitting on about a third of that. They're sitting at below half of 1%. They need to really make gains, or the allocation of seats, the health calculation, which can be quite arcane and quite technical and a little bit random and lucky, they might get a seat.
Okay, so I want us to look at annual income of people in the Western Cape. That's at 30,000 average annual income. But at the top end of it, you have somebody who earns 2.5 million of it, right? A very small portion. And the highest number, that is 21% of residents in the Western Cape earning about 20K annually. It's often been said this is one of the most divided provinces in the country. The city of Cape Town, one of the most unequal. What we're seeing here, is that borne out? Just in terms of how many people voted ANC, who voted DA. We don't even see much of the EFF at this point, but obviously still a large number of votes that are expected to come in.
That division, if we're talking about the metro, as you said, a lot of that vote is still outstanding. If we just go by the last two electoral cycles, if we look at the 2016 municipal elections, not strictly comparable, but interesting, the poorer parts of the city, the less developed and the more removed from infrastructure have traditionally been ANC voters, but the EFF ate into that vote a little bit in areas in wards like Khayelitsha in 2016. The EFF picked up as much as 5 and in one or two memorable cases 7 or 8% of the vote in some of those wards.
We did speak earlier on, we spoke about the phenomena of identity voting, and I want us to look at the Eastern Cape because we were looking at the turnout there earlier on, and we noted the fact that the UDM didn't do quite as well as some expected. There are the results there. UDM at 2.60% of the support in the Eastern Cape, and we did look earlier on at the district map, Nelson Mandela Bay. What would have happened there? Because there's an interpretation that they were being punished.
I think when we look at the Eastern Cape, it's possibly the province that is the most divided in terms of different identities in regional senses. You know, we also have to remind ourselves is the province with two former homelands. That in itself is a product of sort of identity politics. At the same time, if we look at the Nelson Mandela Bay metropolitan area, we have seen, you know, the politics of it since 2016 between the DA on the one hand, the ANC on the other hand, and then, for example, the Patriotic Alliance and the UDM also. And how it has become, in a sense, an unstable situation because it has become such a mix within the metro. But once you move beyond the metro areas, then it becomes more, in a sense, homogeneous within the regions. So we are seeing, for example, here on the map, that the ANC is very much dominant in the northern eastern part of the Eastern Cape, while the DA is more prominent in the southern western part of the province.
But is there a firm understanding of identity politics or a monolithic one? Just if we're talking identity politics and the UDM, some say they would have expected to perform better, as some say they would have expected the IFP to perform better in KwaZulu-Natal. The fact that we've seen better performance for the Freedom Front Plus and the loss for support for the Democratic Alliance in certain strategic places. So, strictly speaking, our understanding of identity politics, is that playing out?
I think to take one step back, identity politics, it's can be quite a complex thing, and it can speak to different parts of a constructed identity. When we talk about the UDM or the IP around identity politics, we could be touching on geography, because traditionally those parties have been, especially in recent elections, more geographically concentrated in their support. It could be about language, which is often the one can be a proxy for the other, because, as the professor said, because of enforced segregation in homelands, people who spoke a certain language, who shared a certain culture, were concentrated and sometimes forced to be concentrated in certain areas. There are other parties where the identity politics could also be around language and ethnicity, but are more geographically diverse. So, to use the Freedom Front Plus as an example, that party support is not concentrated in just one province. And there are also examples of parties that are like the ones in the first group that haven't done well or stood the test of time, such as the United Christian Democratic Party, which you would associate with an area like the Northwest, you would associate with a language such as Setswana. So I guess there are a lot of parties that have been closely linked with identity politics that have fallen by the wayside, and the two that we're talking about that have survived that, and in this election, in the case of the Freedom Front Plus, have thrived. The one is the IFP, and the one is the Freedom Front Plus specifically. And in both cases, you could say that, depending on how long a memory and a history you want to go back, the IFP has survived, but it still is only recovering the losses in the last election to the NFP in 2014. We're not even talking.
And that is another interesting dynamic, then, isn't it, Professor Kotze? Because there are those just looking at the IFP, listening to the IFP's Mkulega Hlanga, very vociferously defending Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi on the fact that he is committed to the fact that he's standing down, and there are those who are saying the IFP couldn't have survived this election without him as the face of the campaign, and some even saying that the NFP lost support because of the illness of Magwaza Msibi. So how does that then play out? Are people still only having faith in a particular political figure?
I think so. If those examples that you've mentioned, plus, for example, General Olomisa in the case of the UDM, not so much the Freedom Front Plus. They had now already 3 different leaders. So there the personality or the figure of the leader is less prominent than these on other parties. I think the important point from my side is that, yes, there are parties that are very much defined by identity, but there are certain limitations to that. They will never be able to become a real political player on the political spectrum or in the political spectrum of South Africa. Right. And that political parties, by definition, must be able to bring together different interests, cross-cutting interests, in order to ultimately reach a majority. And I think because of the nature.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Kotze. And Simpiwe did speak to the Freedom Front Plus about those exact issues. Let's go back to him. Simpiwe?